Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, August 27th. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. Now, Tesla is often heralded as Elon Musk's premier company, the one that makes all the others go. But as Tesla has struggled in recent months, it's Musk's other big company, SpaceX, that keeps surging well ahead of the competition. SpaceX has broken all sorts of new ground in space, and this week they're trying to add the first commercial spacewalk, whatever the hell that is, to the list of accomplishments. Oh, and they're also about to very publicly bail out rival Boeing by retrieving 2 astronauts who are stuck up there at the International Space Station. In a bit, we're going to be joined by our crack space reporters, Loren, Grush, and Bruce Einhorn, to examine all of this cosmic activity. But first, we're going to talk about X, where there's been no shortage of news. With Kurt Wagner, who covers the company for us here at Bloomberg. Hey, Kurt.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And Sarah Fryer, who runs big tech coverage here at Bloomberg. Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
Okay, now, Kurt, we're going to start with you. So the other day, a bunch of the investors who backed Elon Musk when he made his successful bid for Twitter a couple of years ago, their names were revealed publicly for the first time. Tell us who's on that list and whether there are any surprises here for us.
Yeah, there were some surprise investors. There were some expected ones, things, folks we'd seen before, Sequoia Capital, Andreessen Horowitz, Fidelity, sort of these big investors that had been listed in filings before. But there were also some new names. Sean P. Diddy Combs, the rapper, was in there. We had Bill Ackman and Pershing Square. His fund was in there. There was also, we knew about Jack Dorsey, but Jack Dorsey's name was also listed in there. So even though there were some old names, there were some new ones that were kind of fun, kind of giving us a flavor of how widespread, I guess, this investor group was and how many people Elon had to bring into the fold in order to get this money.
Remind us all here, the total investment made was what? What was the purchase price? And do we have a sense of how much each of these individuals put up?
So the total purchase price was $44 billion. We don't know how much, for example, Diddy put in. We do know that some of the other investors had their amounts listed prior. So I believe Sequoia was maybe around $800 million or something like that. I think Andreessen Horowitz was maybe $400 million. Larry Ellison, the Oracle founder, was $1 billion. Jack Dorsey was $1 billion. So we know some of these from prior disclosures. This document didn't include how much everyone invested. But one thing to point out, Elon Musk owns more or right around 75% of X outright. So if you include all these investors, none of them are larger than 10% shareholders, and they all own, percentage-wise at least, a relatively small amount of the company.
Which means a lot of them don't actually get any information about the financial performance of X, right?
Yeah, usually that's shared with the largest.
Why wouldn't Musk be providing them, the people who helped him put this deal together, with periodical updates of how the company was doing?
It just usually depends on how much of a stake you own in a company. So, some private companies will share their financials with, large shareholders, for example. But a lot of the times, they'll have dozens, if not even hundreds of shareholders at the small angel level, and they don't necessarily want that financial information to be spread so widely to so many people, right? So, especially when it's something competitive like X and they have so much debt on their balance sheet, things like that, they probably keep it a little bit closer to the chest so that it doesn't get out into the press and get so distributed that way.
I see. Now, why did this information come out publicly now?
Yeah, it came out as part of a legal filing. So, Elon Musk is involved in many legal disputes right now with people that he owes money to, former employees, things like that. So this came out as part of one of those legal filings.
Okay. Now, Sarah, I wonder what our sense is here for the likes of Ackman and Diddy and the others. Was this backing of Musk's bid to take over Twitter? Was it them currying favor with the person who was either already the world's richest person or about to be the world's richest person? Or did they really see potential here in this acquisition? I mean, I know hindsight's 20/20 and all, but still, I mean, man, this thing has just been a train wreck from the jump.
I mean, you see some folks like Ackman who have become part of the chorus of people saying that, wokeism has gone too far. It's sort of aligned with the Musk politics. And so I could see some of these folks joining because they are aligned with Musk and wanted to sort of change the public conversation about his idea of what content moderation should look like, his idea of what quote unquote free speech should look like. But, you can't separate Elon Musk, the, idealist of Twitter, with Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who also runs SpaceX, Tesla, and a number of other highly influential companies. So if you're giving money to Musk, it's really a small price to pay for access to those future deals, which could be incredibly lucrative, even if you don't think the Twitter deal is going to be that lucrative, or even just favor with somebody who's increasingly influential, not just in our capitalist society, but in geopolitics.
I will just note that the Wall Street Journal reported this last week. They ran the numbers. And of all the hung loans since the great financial crisis, and a hung loan in the jargon of Wall Street is a loan that Wall Street banks, large Wall Street banks, have made to finance takeover deals that they in turn cannot or fail to then sell off to other buyers in the market who want to take this loan off their hands. When they're stuck with that loan, because the loan is such a bad investment and is doing so poorly, the company is doing so poorly, it is referred to as a hung loan. This Twitter loan, or the loan made to Musk and to help finance this purchase, and the biggest banks behind it were titans of Wall Street, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, et cetera, et cetera. It is indeed the worst hung loan since over that period. So you're talking about a 16-year period, I believe now, since the great financial crisis. It's been an absolute mess for these banks, and they just simply cannot get it off their books. Remind me, Kurt, what is the totality of the debt?
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask me that. I believe it's $13 billion or something around that. But I mean, billions and billions of dollars here that he borrowed to buy this company. And as you point out, the reason they can't get these loans off their books, them being the banks, is that the business at X is just doing so poorly that people don't want to, take this loan. They're worried he won't be able to pay it back, right? I mean, David, that's the idea, is like the reason people aren't willing to buy these loans is that they're not confident that X will be able to pay them. And so that is, certainly not a vote of confidence for Elon or a vote of confidence for what he's been able to do at X over these last 2 years since you took over.
Most certainly it is not. I mean, a hung loan, as the term sort of implies, is a pretty bleak thing. And this is a very hung loan, and it's a very large hung loan. Now, on to topic number 2, and on the bright side, the positive side here for X, Donald Trump, Kurt, is back on the platform and is eeksing on a regular basis. Now, we talked about it briefly the other day, but the eekses from the former president keep on coming, huh?
They do. And actually, I saw this weekend that it finally felt like he was truly back, because he had one of those, very ranty tweets that it looked like he just fired off late at night or early in the morning or whatever.
What was it, Kurt?
He was banging on Kamala Harris. I think he called her Commie Kamala or something. He was talking about fracking in the U.S. And it was just one of those things where it had the signature Trump elements, right? It had the all caps words randomly slid in there, had crazy punctuation. It had the nicknames for his political opponents. It was sort of like, the first couple tweets back were like very polished, clearly done by someone on his team. And it's like he finally got the wheels of his Twitter account back, his X account back. And now he's ready to, unload like he used to several years ago. So I feel like these next couple months could be interesting.
So do we have an EEC count from him at this point? Are we into the dozens yet?
I think we're well over a dozen. We're probably nearing close to, I'm scrolling through now, I would guess, 15 to 20 is what we're getting close to. So nowhere near the dozens per day that he used to do, but certainly, I mean, remember, he had only posted one time over almost 3 years. So suddenly the fact that he's sort of back at it at all is newsworthy.
We're building to that, Mr. Wagner. So,
Yes, exactly.
Sarah, from a dollars and cents standpoint for X, this could potentially be meaningful, no?
Well, political advertising historically for social media companies has been such a very small portion of the overall advertising pool. And so despite this resurgence in interest from Camp Trump and the ads that we've seen starting to run, it's necessary to have that mountain of debt. It's helpful. Does it move the needle overall? I don't think so.
I think it's more about drawing attention to the broader platform, right? Like, I don't think that Trump is going to spend enough that it's going to make a big needle change for X. But I think it's like, if you remember 4 years ago, Twitter was just in the news every single day, constantly, right? And X has not had that benefit, even despite everything that Elon does. So if Trump is making news on X every single day or close to every single day, it's just good for the service to be the topic of conversation as we head into an election cycle.
And to bolster that Trump enthusiasm for being on the platform, it's now rolling out the red carpet for him. Like, seems like algorithmically, I just see pro-Trump stuff all the time. Musk himself has backed him. I think that, it's never been a more favorable space to play in. But what we know about favorable spaces for the right, it's not always that big of a success. We've seen a lot of platforms struggle in having only the right on them, because part of what makes this kind of a network fun is the ability to fight with people who disagree with you, for better or for worse. That's why they call it the hell site.
If there's no one to fight with, what the hell's the point of it?
If everyone loves you, then what's the point of shouting, right?
Yeah. Tedious, terribly tedious. The bromance between Trump and Elon is going strong. We actually have a clip from Trump talking about Elon and a potential role he could play in the White House from the other day.
He wants to be involved. Now, look, he's running big businesses and all that, so he can't really, I don't think he'd be cabinet. I'd put him in the cabinet, absolutely, but I don't know how he could do that with all the things he's got going. But he can sort of, as the expression goes, consult with the country and give you some very good ideas. Like on AI, there's nobody knows more about it than Elon. Mm-hmm. It's a big, big thing.
Yeah, I mean, who am I to argue with that? AI is a big thing. Sarah, is Trump's return to X a bit of the deal we have here where, hey, I, Elon Musk, back you in your candidacy, and you, among other things, hey, get yourself back to Eexing?
Yeah, these guys need each other. It's two men with a lot of legal baggage, a lot that could happen to them and their businesses if Trump doesn't get elected president. And that is driving a lot of this. They are historically self-interested when it comes to just Musk growing his businesses in the way he wants to grow them without government intervention. Trump's the guy who says, as long as you are nice to me, I'll let you do whatever you want, essentially. And that's kind of his pitch right now to big companies. And it seems to be working on Musk.
All right. Our third and final X topic here is the arrest of the founder of Telegram, which, dear listeners, you say, well, what does that have to do with X? We will get to that in a second. But first, Sarah, tell us a little bit about Pavel Durov, the founder, and tell us, for the uninitiated out there, what exactly Telegram is.
So Telegram is a chat app. It's kind of like WhatsApp in that people have groups that they join, and they can also one-on-one chat. They can have stories. And it has this sense of feeling a little bit more private, and especially since CEO Pavel Durov has been clear that he wants to support free speech, he wants to support whatever people want to do to express themselves. That has felt to a lot of extremists like a permission to share their ideas within Telegram, and people have become radicalized there, and there has been alleged drug trading, terrorist content, child sexual abuse imagery that has been shared on that app. Now, there is illegal content on every social media platform. That's just the nature of a user-generated content business. But for the most part, when companies know about the content that is violative, they take it down. And the French authorities are alleging that Telegram has not done that, which is why they have gone ahead and arrested Durov.
Now, Kurt, he was, I should say, arrested by French officials, and he's still being held there today, correct?
Yeah, I believe that they have, till Thursday or something to decide. Are they going to charge him with some type of crime, or are they going to sort of kick him to the curb and maybe bring him in as a witness or something? But I think, this idea that a CEO of a large social network could be arrested by a government is the reason this comes back to Elon. Is this is scary for Elon. He has sort of been like, could I be next? Could I be prosecuted in the same way because I'm running X, right?
Crimes or hate speech or things like that committed on your platform, if you willfully turn a blind eye to them, can you at some point be held responsible? And so there is, Kurt, a bit of that precedent issue potentially that would concern him. I mean, he has, Elon in particular there in Europe with the EU and with the UK, he's really been sparring with officials over free speech issues, has he not?
He has, you're right. And I feel like what's sort of interesting about this is when you think about what Elon said when he first took over X. He was asked repeatedly, if you remember, what's your plan for content moderation? How are you going to keep people safe on this platform? And his answer was essentially, if it is illegal, I will remove it. If it is not illegal, it can stay up. He hasn't really followed that. There's several examples that we talked about on this podcast before where he's sort of strayed from that. But that is, at its core, what his content moderation policy is. What's interesting here is that now the CEO of Telegram is being arrested for things that the French government are saying are illegal, that his platform is doing. And Elon is getting upset, right? He's saying, wow, can you believe that they did this? They're going to come for me next. And it's kind of like, well, this is exactly what you said you wanted X to look like. Like, if something is illegal, you will take it down.
And the peak of the bad things that Musk said he would take down, the worst of the worst in his mind was that child sexual abuse material.
That's right.
Which is what French authorities are most concerned about on Telegram.
That's right. The reason I bring that up is I think it just simply shines a light on how messy and complicated this is, and once again shows that Elon came in with sort of this like very black and white plan that I think people who have followed this space for a long time knew, well, it's not really that easy to just say, if it's illegal, I'll take it down. If it's not, I'll leave it up, because you get to instances where you feel the government is crossing the line, right? And certainly child sexual exploitation content, I think aside, I think everyone, including Elon, would agree there's no place for that. But it's just so messy, and I think that he has realized that over his time there, and I think this arrest just highlights how messy it could be still for him if he continues to try and, pursue this everything goes mentality.
By the way, per US law, if you have illegal content on your platform and don't know about it, that's one thing, because it is user-generated content. There's no way that YouTube, for instance, could watch every single minute of video before it's uploaded to see if anything is illegal. But when people report it, when they bring it to your attention, you need to act according to the law, or else you're in violation. And so it's different for different countries. And what social networks have done historically is, like in Germany, where Holocaust denial is illegal, they will take it down. But in other countries where it's not, they'll leave it up. So it gets really complicated. And a lot of companies have cut the government relations staffs that used to manage those kinds of tricky country by country rules situations and negotiate a lot of these things behind the scenes before their CEOs get arrested.
Kurt, Sarah, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
That was a meek thank you, Kurt.
Yeah,
Come on, man. Hit that
Okay.
again. Let's hear it.
Thank you for having me.
Joining me to talk SpaceX are our two crack space reporters, Loren Grush, who's beaming in from Austin, Texas. Loren, hello.
Hi, nice to be here.
And Bruce Einhorn, who's calling in from Princeton. Hey, Bruce.
Hello.
Okay, Loren, we're going to start with you. SpaceX is riding to the rescue to pick up astronauts stranded at the International Space Station. What exactly happened here?
So I might take umbrage with the word stranded, but we can get into that later.
Very good.
No, so this all started back in June with the launch of a crewed test flight that Boeing was launching with its Starliner spacecraft. This is a space capsule that's meant to take NASA astronauts to and from the International Space Station. SpaceX also has its own capsule. It's the Crew Dragon, which they've been launching for many years now. But this was Boeing's turn to prove that its space capsule could safely take people to and from the ISS. Unfortunately, while they were docking with the space station, they suffered a number of technical issues. Namely, they had a number of helium leaks and issues with their thrusters, tiny engines that they use to maneuver through space. They were able to dock successfully, but as they were staying on the space station, NASA and Boeing was running a number of tests and analyses to better understand why those thrusters failed. And ultimately, they could not come up with a consensus as to why the thrusters failed, nor did they feel particularly comfortable with putting the astronauts back in the Starliner capsule to bring them home without having that understanding. And so for the last few months, they've been debating whether or not they want to bring the astronauts home in Starliner. And ultimately, they decided to avoid that risk. They were going to bring the astronauts home in a SpaceX Crew Dragon vehicle instead, which is unfortunately not supposed to come home until February of 2025, which is, a lengthy delay for these astronauts who were supposed to be on board the ISS for roughly a week.
I mean, a trip of a week or so for these astronauts, NASA astronauts, Bush Wilmore and Suni Williams, has indeed turned into a trip for months. Bruce, this is a pretty big coup for SpaceX, is it not? I mean, I would guess and appreciate that in and of itself, in terms of how much additional business it represents for SpaceX, I'm guessing it's not all that much. But the broader significance of NASA turning to SpaceX to ride to the rescue of its rival Boeing here.
As Loren pointed out, this is going to be a regularly scheduled mission for SpaceX anyway, so it's not like they're getting anything additional out of this. So in that sense, there's not extra benefit to SpaceX. What this does is it does highlight the importance of SpaceX, not just to NASA, but more broadly, the role that SpaceX plays in the space economy, because NASA doesn't at the moment have another way to get them back other than via SpaceX.
Or I guess it could have the Russians pick them up. I mean, NASA does still do business with the Russians. I guess your other option, if you don't want to call Elon Musk and SpaceX, is you could call Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, it would be very difficult, though, right, for all sorts of technical and logistical reasons. The Russian spacecraft, the Soyuz, is much smaller and can only handle 3 passengers at a time. And also, turning to Vladimir Putin is not the best thing at the moment.
Correct. So you don't want to turn to Vladimir Putin, so you turn to Musk and SpaceX. Bruce, in a piece you have out this morning, there was a statistic in here that jumped out at me. I believe I have this correct, that SpaceX year to date has done 80 rocket launches. All of its rivals combined, mostly 2 others, have done 14 launches. You have an analyst for us at Bloomberg Intelligence saying SpaceX so dominates space that it has effectively a temporary de facto monopoly. I wonder about the temporary question. If Boeing is descendant here in this space, who else is out there to potentially truly compete with SpaceX?
Well, just to clarify one thing, our Bloomberg colleague who was talking about the de facto monopoly wasn't talking about everywhere in space, but was talking in particular for geostationary satellites, the really big satellites that go much higher up in space. So there are other companies that do launch satellites to LEO, to low Earth orbit. But as you pointed out, SpaceX is by far the leader in terms of number of launches. So it's not a monopoly, but they have a dominant position that puts them way ahead of everybody else when it comes to launches to low Earth orbit.
Yeah, and I suppose all this is really quite amazing for Elon and for SpaceX. I believe, and Loren, correct me if I have this wrong, that the valuation of SpaceX is now over $200 billion. It's a privately held company, so it's tough to come up with exact numbers. And at a time when Musk's Tesla has begun to rapidly lose market share in the EV market, I think that their market share is now down to under 50% from around 80% or so 5 years ago in the US. Its market share in space is surging, approaching some iteration of 100%, not quite, but headed in that direction. I even would suspect at some point it's possible that SpaceX's valuation overtakes Tesla's. But Loren, there are dangers for the US and NASA, to be so dependent on a single company like SpaceX, are there not?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the entire point of picking two providers for the Commercial Crew Program, which is what the Starliner program was a part of. NASA has a term called dissimilar redundancy. It's the idea of having two separate companies, two separate options that perform the same task in case, as kind of illustrated with this entire saga, one of those options is no longer available. Then you have another option that likely doesn't rely on the same parts, the same manufacturers. Yes, ultimately, NASA doesn't want to put all of its eggs in one basket because there could come a time, for instance, when SpaceX has a major failure. In fact, they did have a failure about a month ago where one of their Falcon 9 rockets, which has been a fairly reliable rocket, suffered a failure while in flight during a pretty standard Starlink mission. Now, because SpaceX launches so frequently, they were able to get back to flight pretty quickly. But there may come a time where that doesn't happen. And so the point of having Boeing part of this program was to, avoid that exact scenario. The irony was that, I spoke to Lori Garver, who was the former deputy administrator of NASA. Back when they gave out these contracts, Boeing and members of Congress lobbied pretty hard for Boeing to be the only provider for this program. So it turned out quite well for everyone in NASA in the long run that they ultimately did pick two providers, because I don't think anyone could have foreseen the scenario we would be in back in 2014.
Now, speaking of glitches and SpaceX, Loren, there is a mission of another sorts that was supposed to launch today called the Polaris Dawn, but it was delayed because of setbacks they had. Tell us a little bit about that mission and the significance of it, and walk us through what problems have arisen here.
Yeah, the irony of all this is that a helium leak, I believe, delayed that mission. But
helium, everyone's struggling with helium.
It's a small molecule, to be fair, so it is prone to leakage. No, we don't know the severity of that delay, so I don't want to speculate on that. But yes, this is weirdly coming at the same time as the Starliner decision, but it's called the Polaris Dawn mission. And it's a flight that will send a crew of 4 into a relatively deep orbit around Earth. They're claiming it's the deepest orbit that we've been to since the Apollo era. And they aim to perform the first commercial spacewalk with new spacesuits that SpaceX has developed. Now, those who follow SpaceX, you might recall that SpaceX already has spacesuits, but the ones that we see crews wear are pressure suits that are really supposed to be used only when you launch and when you descend back to Earth. In case of an emergency, in case there's a depressurization event during those phases of flight, they really aren't meant to be used long-term, whereas this new suit is specifically geared toward people spacewalking in the void of space. And so it'll be a really interesting mission to watch. There should be live streams, as that's what they've promised us. So once they do get off the ground, it will be very cool. Also flying on this mission is a familiar SpaceX face. His name is Jared Isaacman. He's a billionaire who launched to space with SpaceX in 2021 on the Inspiration 4 mission. He bankrolled that mission and brought along private civilians with him. And he's doing the same here, but though this is more strictly geared towards research and development. So it'll be an interesting one to watch.
I don't know about you guys, but if somebody tells me, hours before the thing's about to take off that there's a helium leak, there ain't no way in hell I'm getting up there on that thing. But that's me. I'm a coward. But explain to me for a second what exactly makes a commercial spacewalk, i.e., what separates it from other spacewalks? Because SpaceX is charging these people for the privilege of going up in the rocket and walking around in space?
I would say it's pretty much all aspects of it. They are launching on a SpaceX vehicle. The Crew Dragon is a SpaceX Crew Dragon, and the suits, the extravehicular activity, EVA suit, is a SpaceX creation. NASA has definitely been a part of a lot of the development, when it comes to the Falcon 9 rocket and the Crew Dragon. But in terms of their involvement with this mission, this is a purely SpaceX mission.
So it was delayed. It was supposed to go today, the 27th of August. Do we know exactly when it will now go up?
They're saying no earlier than Wednesday, but we don't have an exact time yet. So I think they need to fix whatever the helium leak problem is, and then we'll have a better idea of when they want to go next.
Okay, very good. Bruce, Loren, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong, Naomi Shavin, and Rayhan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rayhan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and we get special editing assistance from Jeff Grocott. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Noonan is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks, as always, to our supporter, Joel Weber. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.